from your experience of doing this for 52 years, you've been studying all of this stuff at 65 years old, doing this for 52 years, having all of these things with yoga and herbalist and martial arts. And this is stuff most people can't get one black belt in a martial art, alone multiple black belts and four, and then be a master yoga. So you have discipline. There's no ifs and buts about it, that when you put your mind to something, you get it done. And you've left your body not only in the death, but you know how to astral plane, which most people don't understand what that means. But you can lay there and you can leave your body with your energy spirit body and travel, right? And you used to do that. You've said this before in shows where you were doing that a lot. And then, you stayed. Me, myself, I felt that happening to me. And me, I'm like, I got to stay here because I got to get stuff done. But, you're a person that, have had a lot of experience with this. And, people, like you said, they're looking up to heaven. But can you talk about where heaven is? Isn't it a dimension?
Well, what the Lama said to me right out of the body in surgery was the most simplest answer, and that heaven is a different vibration. So let's look to scripture for a minute for an answer. One quote made from scripture is, I knew a man in the body or out of the body, only God knoweth. He was raised to the seventh heaven. And they speak of heavens in the ways that today scientifically we would call them dimensions. So what we know, whether they're talking about 7 from 3, right, then we would know it's 4 more levels, or are they really talking about, all the way to 10? So the point is that depending on that in scripture, they're talking about the 7th to the 10th dimension. The Lama series says today that the way Abba, the architect of creation, that's what they call him, Abba, the architect of creation, that he set up 12 formed dimensions with 7 different frequencies on. So it really comes down to, Jimmy, a couple of things. First of all, you go nowhere. You absolutely go nowhere. It's a shift in consciousness, and it's a shift in vibration. When that vibration and that conscious awareness merge, you are there.
Yeah,
you are there.
Everything. It's just like, a lot of folks, and again, people. I don't blame you to be aware of stuff, but not be addicted to the fear side of the equation. Because, I could have a reality, and Brother Rasaji, Lama Rasaji, could have a reality where we're living heaven on earth, and you're living hell on earth. And,
right.
Either one could be here depending upon what vibration you're in, right? I mean, and going into that different dimension.
Not only that, I work with people who live in the multiple states that Jimmy just talked about.
Right.
I've got a girl right now that I'm working with, bless her heart, that is going through Kundalini and second birth. But until she came into my world about 1.5 years ago, she had never heard of this, but she's already halfway in it. And what happens is, as this energy increases through your vortexes, which in yoga they refer to the Sanskrit word chakra, which just means a wheel that spins. It's, in a sense, your psychic endocrine gland system is basically what it is. When you grow spiritually, then what happens by the law of creation of the universe that Abba himself set up, remember, he's also outside of creation, and that's what makes him God. And so as he set this up, the law that he set into motion, when you help people, when you're good to people, when you serve people without asking anything, you do something of love that's unconditional. In other words, you do something like him and his angels normally do.
Yes.
He has to increase your energy and light. Well,
yes,
that's okay. So that energy and light, we've seen pictures of halos. So it comes in like the halo to the crown center, his golden light. Now, what it wants to do, it wants to do what they talked about in Revelations. When Jesus is instructing John, who was on the island of Patmos, about two things: second birth and the second coming. We're talking about second birth and his second coming. Okay. He says that when this starts to happen, you got to get on the other side of second birth. He begins to describe what that looks like. He says there'll be 7 churches with 7 candles, angels on both sides of the gate, opening the gates fully. And one of those lights will be like the sun, not S-O-N, but S-U-N, meaning the sun in the sky. Can you imagine? We're supposed to have a light shining out of our bellies that is as bright as the sun. Think about that for a second. So what happens is when he sends you more energy and light, if you have what I call the Mozart syndrome, Jimmy and me, our 3rd or 4th patron Lama that we did was on death urge and birth trauma. You need to review that with basically what I'm getting ready to say. And that is that if you have a resistance to that, a mild resistance could produce a vertigo or motion sickness kind of reaction. That means it's happening on a psychic level right now only, but because the psychic body, the energy body, feeds the physical body, you're going to have a little topsy-turvy kind of feeling. If you hold on to the resistance long enough and it becomes physical, you're looking at a neuromuscular disorder. Why? Because the central nervous system, what they call the involuntary nervous system, becomes all of a sudden as active as the voluntary nervous system that goes up and down the spinal column. And it begins to take your glands and your psychic glands, and it turns all the flow of the energy out. And if you're emotionally, psychologically looking in the mirror, this is why we have people do mirror meditation, and you say, you know what? I don't deserve this. I think God dropped me off at the bus station. I kind of feel depressed. What is a word for depressed? A word for depressed means for whatever the reason, for this much a time, or for this much a time, depending on how much you hang on to depression, is a disconnect to God, a disconnect to the Almighty. When you all of a sudden say, no, I deserve this flow. If you do enough mirror meditation to become self-realized, then you're going to open up your tongue. Now, watch what else it says in Scripture in reference to this. You can always find answers in Scripture. So he says, believe unto the Christ, and out of your belly will flow waters of living life. So when a person's resisting this, they're fighting the waters flowing out of the belly, which makes them become ungrounded, uncentered. And it's like they're saying, no, God, no, Abba, please don't send me more power and more light. That's what they're saying to the energy. What happens is you have a conflict. You have an opening in your body. Just like if I'm running a residential house, any electrician will tell you, you need 110 watt in that house. But if I'm running a commercial warehouse organization, then they're going to tell you, you need 220. If I start sending you 220 and you're hanging on to 110, this is why we're seeing young children have strokes. This is why we're seeing people in their 20s have heart attacks that the medical field can't. And the medical field knows less about neuromuscular disorders than they know just about anything. And how many people do you know today in your family tree that have either MS, palsy, Parkinson's, Lou Gehrig's disease. This, by the way, and I'm going to tell you why this is happening, is the fastest growing maladies on our planet. And it's affecting a lot of our children of light. In other words, it's affecting the ones who came here and raised their hand. And when the Lama told me to get back in the body and do what you came here to do, Lama, they're resisting it. I have one lady right now, she's beautiful, 21 years old. She has such a potential future. She's gorgeous in the soul, gorgeous in her face, just beautiful person. But sometimes when she looks in the mirror, she don't see that person. In my first book called The Circle of Life, I address this issue. I call it the Mozart syndrome. If you know anything about Amadeus Mozart, you'll know this guy was producing concerts at 7 and 8 years old. He was a protege. You know this. By the time he's 19, 20, he's looking in the mirror and literally willing death to happen to himself, because in his soul, there's not the light of the Christ. It's like a black hole in space. If we deny God, if we turn our back on him, or we just don't want to accept his blessings and his energy, you'll live a victim life. If you yield to God, if you bring a relationship to him every day, at least 15, 20 minutes a day, and give thanks. He gave you life the first time by letting you be born through a mother. That was the baptismal of water. By the way, that is the real baptismal of water. But there needs to be a baptismal of the holy fire, and that's of the Father, and that's the second birth that Master Rebbe Jesus talked about. And why did he stay? Why am I having people today read the Acts of the Apostles when they're following me on the Daily Lama? Why? Because I want you consciously to fill in the blanks. I want you to understand why he stayed. We're going to talk more about that later.